With Nagarro's diverse range of resilience engineering services, you can build robust and reliable systems and ensure business continuity. Our tailored solutions ensure that your brand has the unbeatable advantage of staying at the top, even during unforeseen events.
All right. So, hi everyone. I'm Sarthak Jain, a senior software developer at Harness and also maintainer at Litmus Chaos project. So, thank you for attending Chaos Carnival and special thanks to our sponsors for supporting our community and this event. So, for this session, we have with us Rajan George, who is a senior performance and reliability engineer and will be talking about shift left resilience evaluation of modern distributed systems. All right, Ruben. So, yeah.
Hey, thank you, Sarthak. Hello, everyone. Good morning and evening to all of you. I'm Rajan George, and I work as a performance and resilience test architect at Accenture. And today I'm going to talk about the anatomy of resilience. It's a primer for the shift left resilience evaluation for modern distributed systems. And today I'm going to walk you through some foundational understanding on how to build and evaluate for resilience much earlier in your application lifecycle. And lately, I've been quite intrigued, of the intelligent design behind our own human body. And I've been able to see a lot of parallels in how the body organs function individually and holistically as one great organization. And interestingly, as one big smart city, I felt that there are some interesting takeaways that will help us define, design, and evaluate resilience of modern distributed architectures. So I stumbled on a few illustrations that actually impressed me immensely. This first one is this visualization that interprets the human anatomy in the style of the London's transit system. Actually, this was created by Jonathan Simmons, a resident physician at the Tufts Medical Center. It's a beautiful, intuitive demonstration of how efficiently our bodies work. You can see that the nodes depicted as white dots and the network of colored lines, showing those various metro lines. So the pink line to depict the vermilion system for the boundary between the mouth to the bottom lip, the black line to depict the airway system from the nose and the mouth down to the windpipe and the lip, the yellow line to depict the nervous system from the temporal lobe of the brain to the fingertips and the feet, purple line to depict the portal system that transports blood, and finally the magenta line to depict the special system related to senses and reproductive organs. There's more about this. I've put a link to this in the reference section. Now I'll be showing another illustration, very similar illustration by Sam Lohman later in this presentation. So one of the key takeaways from the illustration is how intricately and wonderfully the human body has been designed and built. One of the many quality attributes of any complex system, take the body for example, are durability, efficiency, fault tolerance, observability, recoverability, redundancy, reliability, resilience, and survivability. And I felt impressed to talk about few resilient design patterns that I was able to gather from my brief study of the human body. And here's an excerpt from the Yale School of Medicine. There's going to be a passage I'm going to read out, and then we can look at the next excerpt. The body is a battlefield. It deals with insults and injuries every day, from a sting of a paper cut to the massive damage that can occur during a stroke. Immune cells fight off infection, torn muscles recover, broken bones mend. Even an organ as fragile as the brain can recover. Speech and motor function may return even after large swaths of the brain cells perish during a stroke. The human body and the brain are designed to bounce back from injury. And part of that robustness comes from the fact that cells in our bodies have outstanding programming, and they can repair and reconstitute tissue and organ function even after an insult. To a large extent, the body heals on its own. Here's another note. Different tissues and organs have different degrees of resilience. This is another professor from the same school. So a hard skull shields the brain from mechanical blows, and internal mechanisms maintain the supply of glucose and oxygen to the brain, even at the expense of other tissues. These mechanisms ultimately increase the resilience of the entire organism because they protect the weakest links in the system. Now, incidentally, as I share this, a verse from the Bible comes to my mind. It's like this: some parts of the body that seem weakest and least important are actually the most necessary. And the parts we regard as less honorable are those we clothe with greatest care. So we carefully protect those parts that should not be seen, while the more honorable parts do not require the special care. So God has put the body together such that extra honor and care are given to those parts that have less dignity. This makes for harmony among the members so that all members care for each other. Yeah, it kind of flows with what the Yale School of Medicine kind of described. So here are some design patterns that I could gather from my brief study. So many of these terminologies or words would be quite familiar to you. So for one thing, one of those is self-recovery, self-healing. You know that organs heal, wounds heal, and there's a study that confirms that the body itself renews itself every 7 years. Cells can heal themselves when they become unhealthy, and they even replicate to replace damaged or destroyed cells. So there's some insights that we can get when we look at these design patterns. Another one is sensitivity and signaling. So the nervous system with nerve endings reach the extremities of our body. The endocrinal system transmits data and control. And the body raises temperature to trigger cellular mechanism to kill viruses and bacteria. So think about the closed loop, feedback systems that come through observability and monitoring and all of that. Yeah. Another one is these protective measures like shielding, intruder detection, and elimination. So bones protecting the weaker organs, immune system shielding against failures from neighboring systems, mucus that is trapping foreign materials like a firewall, and another one is self-reconfiguration. So basically the brain rearranges itself after a trauma, rerouting messages and even functions, creating alternate pathways. So these are some design patterns which come to my mind quickly, when I read this out to you. Redundancy. The way we have, the body has a lot of duality in almost every critical organ or service. The whole body functions normally, even with the lack of one, until repair is completed to prevent some sort of body downtime, and that downtime is usually rest. Yeah. So here are some of the design patterns that I could gather. And if I were to dig deeper, there'll be a lot more design patterns that we could learn and study from the human body that are basically, that have great use for us in our distributed complex architectures. So here are classes of patterns that I could gather for complex systems resilience. And one is recovering, shielding, and observe. So in my attempt today to classify these design patterns for modern distributed groupings, I put them into these three groups. Yeah. So like any complex system, the body can be broken down into parts like the heart, lungs, brain, nose, kidneys. You can see that each part performs efficiently, and there's a certain level of resilience in its structure and function. And to talk about throughput, the heart beats 100,000 times a day, 22,000 times a day we breathe, and the brain transmits signals at 268 miles per hour. So you can get some kind of throughputs and so on from that information there. Yeah, and when it comes to interconnection between the parts, that's the blood vessels, the airways, and all of that. Yeah, the heart communicates with the brain. You can see the connection there, neurologically, biochemically, through hormones, biophysically, and energetically through electromagnetic field interactions. And the lungs, the blood-lungs relationship and communication happens through the pulmonary artery and veins. And finally is the third aspect, which is the functions or the purpose, the third level, which is basically the functional level, which is cardiopulmonary, respiratory, cardiovascular, digestive, and nervous. So enough of all the biology. Let's look into computers. So here's the same representation of how it would look like for a typical e-commerce application. And I tried to take an example of your favorite demo application, which is the boutique application or the socks application, which we are so familiar with. And we hear the components here are the lowest level or the atomic elements, which is this inventory service, which is either implemented as a microservice or an application on a VM or a serverless component. And then we have those network and dependencies that includes network components, physical or software-defined caches, queues, middleware, all of that to either orchestrate or pace the traffic. And business flows, which are those end-to-end integrated systems to service a particular business process. And interestingly, multiple business processes may use the same routes, but they may go with different latencies and different kinds of resilience, degrees of resilience, that's a discussion for a later time about these degrees of resilience. Hence, resilience has to be built into every aspect of a complex system. That is on the component level, network level with dependencies, and end-to-end business processes or flow. So this is the fundamentals that we are looking at, and this helps us kind of create those mental models on how we even want to estimate for an effort to do this work. Yeah, so here are some design patterns for a component, which can be either compute, storage, database, or any other. I've attempted to just document some of these common reliability patterns. There are n number of them out there, and these are some common ones. And these can be implemented today either as libraries, you're familiar with them, like Hystrix, and either as libraries to code, or there are configurational options to apply, on your cloud consoles and so on. For example, let's take one, the idempotency. So idempotency ensures that we have the ability to replay any invocations with a guarantee that a duplicate invocation won't produce a new side effect. This is huge in all types of systems because it means that if an error occurs, we can simply retry the invocation. Another benefit is that when we process multiple invocations in parallel, if one of them fails, that's okay because we are resilient and we can always retry. And that comes to the shielding one. The retry helps the component to handle transient failures from networks, connectivity issues, component failures, overloads. And there are various strategies to implement retries depending on use cases. So one of them is retry delays, retries with constant or incremental or random or exponential backups. And finally, I want to just talk about health endpoint monitoring. Basically, it's your early warning system, kind of like a sensory system, if your service is performing correctly or incorrectly. And if you couple this with flame graphs, traces, and log analysis, to dig deeper into your methods, you could further optimize the health and state of your component. So this is going and dissecting into the more atomic or cellular level. So let's go one level higher. Here are some design patterns for network or communication interfaces, which can include clusters, networks, orchestrations, choreographs, all of that. Let's take, for example, the queue-based load leveling, pattern. This is very familiar. This is the most common pattern that we see out there in modern systems. The queue acts like the buffer between two services. This pattern is usually introduced to smoothen intermittent heavy loads, that can cause downstream services to fail or timeout. This pattern helps maximize availability because delays caused by services won't have immediate or direct impact on the downstream, as messages can be posted onto the queue and even when the downstream system is not available. Now you want to pair this pattern with another pattern, or this pattern can be applied or be relevant when other patterns are applied, say competing consumers pattern, where you have multiple consumers, or a throttling pattern, which is one of the shield patterns. As the queues themselves can be used as a throttling pattern to throttle requests to a service. So the service can process requests at a rate that ensures that resources required by the service aren't exhausted, and to reduce the amount of contention that could occur. Now, let's go a little higher now. This is now talking about the more global, the more zonal level fault tolerance. And here are some design patterns. At a business process level, we are looking at, say, product purchase as an example. This includes these application function groups deployed into, and we're going to take the example of redundancy. That's the most simple example. This includes deploying these application function groups into multiple availability zones. And the goal here is to ensure redundancy of functions and data across geographical zones. And some of the common patterns here is geocaching, which also enables content to be cached in local zones, CDNs, or data centers closest to the customer, to reduce network latency for commonly accessed files through distributed edge caching. And another point, now that you're at this very business level, fault tolerance, you also want to ensure that your user experience is not impacted. And typically, user experience is captured using real user monitoring, where some code snippets are embedded in your devices, in your browsers, to capture the on-the-ground performance and customer experience. Yeah. So this is a familiar territory. Now, what I'm going to talk about next are the tools and how do you test for these design patterns. So now that you've understood your design patterns, now you as a chaos engineer or resilience test engineer, now that you have worked not at the time of when all your systems are ready up and running, now you can even test for these resilient patterns much earlier, as and when each of these services are being developed. So for example, once the inventory service is being developed, you could use a combination of tools that are seen here and techniques like hypothesis, experimentation, and all to evaluate those resilient designs patterns that you've applied. This is just a representation of tools like the triangle up there, which is the harness chaos engineering for introducing node level failures. Locust IO for simulating message or transaction concurrency, and observability tools to monitor service or application. So here's an example of a combination of tools employed along with the hypothesis or experiment approach of chaos engineering to validate the steady state resilience of the inventory application, to basically see whether it's fault tolerant, the right number of replicas are in place, and it's able to scale effectively. Yeah. So the next one is another example to validate queue egress throughputs. Dead letter queues. These are various dead letter queues while evaluating retry and timeout logic applied to prevent cascading failures. So this is the higher level. So you would want to kind of introduce cluster level failures, cluster level faults to disrupt the networks. And also you want to introduce the load and monitor your SLIs and SLOs. Yeah. And finally, here is an example to test availability or region level failovers as part of your disaster recovery or IT service continuity management objectives. So here you're looking at trying to disrupt traffic entering into one availability zone to see how quickly your request gets routed to your secondary zone, as well as how available is your data as well. So this is basically a primer or a framework for planning, designing, and estimating for resilience. And here are some of the references of some of the content that I referred to build this presentation. And on the side is a research that we did a few years ago on state of resilience of various companies. Varied companies, and we see that around 10%. There's a long way to go, and we believe that we are at the right place, positioned in a better place now with tools, frameworks, and we have platforms to take us ahead. Yeah, and a final takeaway on a lighter note is I'm not sure if you have seen this when you were a child. This is Osmosis Jones, a 2001 live animation action crime comedy. And what's interesting about this movie is this depiction of the human body as one smart city with the mayor and police department. And the police department happens to be your white blood cells. The protagonist over here, the blue Aussie, who fights off a virus villain by the name of Thrax with the help of his partner Drix, a cold pill. Yeah, but this depiction of the body as a smart city and the work that's happening under the hood is pretty interesting. Yeah, you can go ahead and check it out. And that's all I had. And this was basically a fundamentals primer kind of session. And I thank you all for patiently listening to my talk. I hope this has piqued your interest and helped you in any way. And thank you, Hannes, for this great opportunity.
Yeah, hey Ruben, that was a great session, and the audience is surely loving the way you explained the systems using the human anatomy. That was a really great session. So,
Thank you very much, Arthur. Yeah, I will be monitoring the chat. If there are a few questions, I'll respond directly onto the chat.
Sure. I do have one question for you, Ruben. So, like you talked about
Sure.
chaos engineering, in the modern distributed systems. So, like, what do you feel are the organizations missing by not using chaos engineering in their systems?
No, so you're saying, are the organizations missing something when they're not implementing chaos engineering? Certainly, yes. There. So I'm working on a lot of projects where we are seeing a lot of demand, especially in financial and telecom companies, because they value and see the importance of resilience and ensuring their systems are available all the time. And we are now seeing a lot of customers migrate from traditional mainframe systems to more modern systems. And we have seen that they are looking for chaos engineering tools to kind of evaluate resilience. And lately, we have also seen the market move towards, what has been traditionally supercritical, industries. They are now moving most of their workloads to cloud. So yes, chaos engineering is one great tool to introduce faults and evaluate fault tolerance and resilience of your system. Yeah.
Yeah, that answers my question. Thanks. All right, so I cannot see any questions in the chat as of now.
Yeah, we have one more question, I guess.
All right.
Shift on the stage. Yeah.
Oh, very good question. Yes. So when we talk resilience, and this is, we are very familiar with infrastructure resilience. There is, in order to enable technology resilience, you need to have resilience governance, you need to have operational resilience, you have kind of like 6 other, non-technical resilience measures that need to go in for any enterprise organization or business. So that's why, holistically, we've seen, yes, some of the, disaster of the 8,300 are research, and it's public available. You can have a look at it. Though they may not, what we have seen is they don't have technical resilience embedded in their systems. Many of the customers, or we've seen that they don't even do basic BCDR, and this is because these were traditional systems. They've been, they're all, customer off-the-shelf products, which are, which have shared responsibility on resilience and reliability. So that's one of the main reasons. So resilience here is not just technical IT, technology resilience, but there is operational resilience. There are 3 to 4 other, branches of resilience as well that we also include as part of the survey. And 10% is actually a very low number. So that actually opens up us for great opportunities, and we see a lot of demand in the space.
So yeah, Ruben, we have one more question from John. So he's asking, what are Accenture clients' top challenges in adopting?
Yep. Some of the challenges, so I can take from, because I'm involved in most of these discussions, because as a resilience SME, I'm involved in most of these discussions with the customers. is maturity in understanding even the fundamentals and the topics. And what they have traditionally seen chaos engineering is more like the Netflix kind of model, a Netflix approach. And that's why, as part of my responsibility, is to educate them about design patterns, how about the shift left resilience. So it's not about running chaos engineering exercises, running tests and running hypotheses and so on, but there's a lot of structure involved in evaluating from a very component level, shift left kind of work. And that's why these talks generate from that kind of discussion with the customer. So I've spent most of my time educating them that it's more about resilience, and we use chaos engineering as a method. The tools, chaos engineering tools like harness chaos engineering as methods to test fault tolerance and resilience of the system. I hope that answers your question, John. So it's more like educational for us. We want to explain them that rather than looking at chaos engineering as a discipline, we also would repurpose chaos engineering to test fault tolerance much earlier in your system. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Ruben. So yeah, I guess that's it. And like we do have more such interesting sessions lined up. So yeah, I would request you all to join them as well. Once again, thank you, Ruben, for this session.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity, Sarthak.